I was at the rental store this week, and my choices for new releases was either Star Trek or Dead Island Riptide. For some reason after getting there, I was torn between the two, which was strange because going in, I had every intention of getting the new zombie-infested island game. But Star Trek was simply too alluring. Not sure why, maybe I let the hype surrounding the upcoming movie cloud my better judgment. Regardless of the reason, I ended up getting Star Trek with hopes that it would be more than just another unimagined movie tie-in game. Odds were against it, seeing as 99% of movie games could and usually should be classified as awful. To my dismay, this one wasn't in the rare 1% category. While still being better than a lot of movie games, Star Trek fails to be much more than another uninspired shooter. The concepts behind this game are about as creative as its title. It's a third-person, cooperative, cover-based shooter that attempts to rival Gears of War 3 on how many times a team effort is required to open a door. Just in case they didn't succeed there, they had a backup plan of trying to topple Mass Effect's record on elevator scenes. Star Trek is bold enough source material to work with that one expects the different locations to look spectacular. Instead of being blown away, I was usually dulled by the just okay presentation. I will admit though on occasion, I thought it looked pretty good, but those thoughts never lasted very long, considering the awful transitions from gameplay to cutscenes and the atrocious animations. Alright, well to be fair, the animations themselves look fine, but for some reason they have a delayed reaction. For example, when jumping towards a cliff that you're required to latch onto, the character will bounce into the cliff and start to fall, causing me to think I was going to die, but then after a second the animation will magically start up and he will grab onto the cliff, despite the fact it looks like he teleported to do so. Another strange yet slightly amusing decision was allowing the player to be able to literally run inside of and through their AI companion. I suppose this may have been done to prevent them from bumping into you or getting in your way. Although oddly enough, they didn't decide to do this with bullets. If you shoot at him, he will block your shots instead of allowing you to shoot through him. Cutscenes look decent, except I can't help but want more from them, probably because their quality doesn't match the stellar voice acting. I say that because thankfully this game acquired the actual actors and actresses from the movie to voice their respective roles. Not much point in doing so though, when the characters on screen don't do them justice. From the start, the player is given the option to choose between the careful and calculating Spock or the brash and arrogant Captain Kirk. There are only very minor differences between the two, so it doesn't really matter who you choose. Since the two of them are constantly together throughout the course of the game, there is plenty of great dialogue between them as expected. The story takes place between the events of the 2009 Star Trek movie and the upcoming Star Trek Into Darkness film. After having beaten the game, I can't really say that playing this game enhances the overall story. In other words, when you watch the new movie, I doubt you're going to think that playing the game added to the experience, because to be honest, the story told in the game was kind of boring. Of course, that may have been because the cinematics weren't that fun to watch. I didn't focus a lot on the game's audio when I was playing, but there were moments when it had some nice background music. I'm not much of a Star Trek buff, seeing as I've only seen the 2009 Star Trek, but I'm assuming it was the classic music. Alright, so on to the category that makes or breaks a game, the gameplay. Star Trek has all the right materials to be a great third-person shooter, it's just that the quality of those materials are less than desired. The developers were very smart about this game's pacing, packed full of platforming, hacking minigames, flying through space dodge sequences, interesting puzzles, timed events, collectibles. Actually, it seems like you don't even start shooting people until you're 45 minutes in. Now one would think that all of that I just mentioned sounds pretty good. Some of it is, but none of it is fully realized. Once again, I must refer back to quality, and the quality of this entire game is just really average. It's got everything, except none of it is done well enough. The dodge sequences, instead of being exciting, intense, and fun like they are in Dead Space, are pretty corny and almost boring. It doesn't help that the game doesn't give you enough control over your character, and a few times I died without appearing to have hit anything. Shooting mechanics in this game are acceptable. Actually, I was quite fond of the animation the character has when simply running around popping off shots without aiming in with the left trigger. This game, like most third-person shooting games, insists on you wanting to take cover a lot, which would be fine if this game had a cover system that wasn't so lame. I've seen worse cover systems, but this one had too many issues and would occasionally screw up my shots. Something I realized towards the end of my playthrough is if you want the cover to be the most effective, just constantly blind fire. You will take very little damage, yet you're still fairly accurate. I didn't realize how advantageous blind firing was until I was a good 75% done with the game. Probably because it doesn't look like it should be, seeing as your character still pops his head up more than he should, yet for some reason he will hardly take damage. Something to keep in mind if any of you decide to give this game a go. Coincidentally, this game, like Army of Two, which I just got done playing, also has a cover-to-cover system. I loved the one from Devil's Cartel because it was so simple and easy to use. This one is a bit more of a nuisance to activate, and the animation that follows is so lame it's actually kind of laughable. The control scheme accompanying this game is not as thought out as I would have liked. Comes across as a bit clunky, and I'm sure that if further thought would have been put into it, they could have come up with something a bit more smooth. I did quite how at all times I had a pistol type weapon with infinite ammo, along with one main weapon which could be swapped out with tons of weapons on the map. Actually, every weapon in this game has its own sort of charm, probably because they offer a nice variety and are unique from one another. Every weapon has a secondary shot which can be activated with the tap of the right bumper. As expected, the phaser's alternate fire mode is stun, which is surprisingly effective. Almost any enemy can be stunned and then executed with a press of the X button. Kinda weird seeing how enemies can take so many real bullets, yet can be incapacitated with a simple stun execution combo. One of the animations for Spock is the Vulcan Pinch, which is highly amusing to watch. Since you are able to stun enemies, there are areas in which stealth can be utilized. While it is very helpful to attempt to adhere to these opportunities, I often found myself getting spotted and having to shoot my way out. The campaign averages between 6 to 10 hours to complete a playthrough. Mine was probably pushing the 10-hour mark since my partner AI companion has some serious issues actually staying alive. I encountered this more towards the end of the game when the gunfights got a little bit more frequent and intense. He seemed to get into the habit of becoming even more stupid as the game progressed. I mean, I noticed it in the beginning when he would get stuck up on an object and not always do as I told him to, but I never got frustrated with him until he started dying on me. Really, I'd like to say the bad AI, both friendly and enemy, didn't bother me. That would be a lie though, because their stupidity often annoyed me. Might just be the worst AI I've seen this year thus far. Star Trek 2013 has a lot going for it, so much so that I could have seen it breaking the trend that's associated with movie games, only if it would have been of a higher quality. Sure, dialogue-wise, the game is quality, what with the entire main cast lending their voice, but graphically, the game fails to be anything more than average. This averageness rubs off on its gameplay as well, turning it into another run-of-the-mill, cover-based, third-person shooter. Doesn't help anything that the AI is, and should be, called worthless. If you are a Star Trek fan, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you that this is not a worthy Star Trek game. On the bright side though, it could have been a lot worse, and it does offer a bit of fun, especially since there are very few games based in the same universe. Just do yourself a favor and wait until this game is more around the $20 price tag. May the Star Trek franchise live long and prosper, even if this game dies young and fails. Star Trek 2013 gets a 5.8 out of 10.